This is AUGforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered and independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. First, thank you to our sponsors, Repay, DataSelf, and Velixo. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention two more things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, I'm always looking for victims, guests, on the podcast. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn about being a guest on the podcast. Second, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out the instructions at augforums.com/Rolodex to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Friday, October 15th, 2021, and this is episode number 52, Mariano Gomez, MVP, ISV, discussing the Microsoft Power Platform. Mariano, thanks for joining today, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having me time with you and your audience. And a little bit about me, I guess. I'm originally from San Andres Island in Colombia. It's a tiny island off the Caribbean coast of Colombia. And I come from a family of brainiacs. I like to say that, my dad and my mom are the ones who actually got me into this madness. Dad was a math and physics teacher at various grade levels. Mom was an accountant, so you can start to get the idea from there. Plus, I have two siblings who are engineers, and one is a business admin. So we do come from a family of brainiacs, I like to call it. I started my career specifically around Dynamics GP, as you probably know, back in '96. I had just graduated from college and started working for, back then, what is known as an international allied partner for the Great Plains College, and started working for, back then, what is known as an international allied partner for the Great Plains, the former Great Plains Company, which was acquired later on by Microsoft. IAPs basically handled everything related to the product distribution in Latin America, around the world. We just happened to have the Latin American distribution. And part of that was that responsibility involved translating and localizing the product for the region where the IAP is located, while developing the partner base. So I spent the first 2 years of that experience between Bogota and Fargo, North Dakota, if you can imagine that long trip between those two cities.
Very warm to very cold.
Yeah, very warm to very cold, especially during the winter time. And
do this more. Do you know how that worked from an intellectual property standpoint? Did you get to own the translation, or do you know how that worked?
That is an interesting question, because we did in fact own the translation at the time. What we didn't own, of course, was the actual software itself. So we did own the translation. We did not own the intellectual property of the software itself. And typical translation, you export all your application resources, strings, etc. There are some that are not translatable. You send that off to a specialized translation team. You get those back and you suck them back into the software, and boom, you have a translated product. Then you have to go around, adjusting screen resources, as you know, probably from certain translations. Certain things tend to be longer in Spanish than they are in English, and vice versa. So just adjusting, have a chopped off screen, chopped off set of characters on the screen where you need some readability, right? So
That makes
that's
sense that you'd have a partner who knows the application. It's not just about translating language.
correct.
It's about fitting it on screens and knowing the context. And so you owning the IP and being motivated to stick with it. That makes
Yep.
sense.
Yeah, so later on during the acquisition that Microsoft did of Great Plains, they actually recouped all that intellectual property from their IAPs, and that's how they managed to distribute, translated versions of Dynamics GP across, the world. So it was certainly interesting. From to me was at the time more so traveling across Latin America, collecting all sort of uh, you know localization requirements for the software. And that's nothing more than just getting like your equivalent of gapping across Latin America, collecting all sort of, uh, you know, localization requirements for the software. And that's nothing more than just getting like your equivalent of gap functionality and putting that into the products. So things like handling taxes. We had some special cases like inflation adjustment on assets and so on. So just understanding all that stuff and getting that to be compliant, or getting the software to be compliant with those requirements, was quite the work. So well, just kind of continuing along the lines, I then got recruited back in '98 here by a company in South Florida. So that started my journey really to the United States, where I became a permanent resident 5 years after that, and a citizen, 10 years after that. So in '07, I decided to jump ship and establish my own consulting practice. Um, it was also the same time I was thinking of moving to Atlanta. So we worked our way through a significant number of implementations. We tackled mostly complex implementation projects across borders, and worked mostly with distributors, with product distribution companies. And I did that till 2015, when I had enough, and sort of parted ways with my business partner, and came back to development here at McCorma, which is where I'm working now. And you probably know McCorma from the AP automation days, where you used to do maker check printing, but we've grown obviously beyond that, and we embrace mostly um, you know Power Platform. And it's something we're going to be talking about to figure out how we bring automation into our products. We certainly have expanded into electronic payments and remote payments per se. So that's something else that we do today on the GP platform, of course. And now I've worked my way all the way up to CTO of the company. So part of what I do nowadays is spending time understanding technology and how we can definitely leverage technology into our products, and certainly across our organization. Um, that's in a nutshell my background.
That's great. And I only record the audio on these, but we've both got our videos on. I see the nice beach background there of your hometown in Colombia, and I love to hear in the journey there from
Yeah,
Colombia to Florida to Atlanta, and your hometown in Colombia. And I love to hear in the journey there from
yeah.
Colombia to Florida to Atlanta, and who knows where to next, right?
Who knows where to next? You never know. Ultimately, I hope, for my own sake, that I still have some more stuff left in the tank, and can apply my skills in various different ways. But yeah, for now, it's here at McCormick. I love it here, and I love the people I work with, and certainly we are doing interesting things, so that keeps me busy and grounded, I guess.
What ERP systems does McCorma integrate with?
Okay, so we've, as I mentioned earlier, we've done quite a bit on the Dynamics GP space. We've branched out into Business Central, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. Boy, that's a mouthful right there. And we were there for the week of Summit, stayed for training, everything. And my team right now, and my development team, is actually working towards some deep dive into the platform, understanding more of the development concepts and patterns, and certainly looking into areas where we can fill a gap and a need. So
So
I
this is
think
really
we're
your first foray from a McCormick standpoint. Your first foray from a McCormick standpoint outside of the Microsoft space, and then your first personally in decades
Mhm.
outside of the Microsoft space. Is that
That
right?
is correct. That is correct. But
Very,
you
yeah.
know,
I was
it's
when you messaged me, I think you messaged me a few weeks before the summit, asked me if I was going to be there, and I was like, "Oh, this is very interesting. You're going to
yeah,
be at the
yeah.
summit?"
Yeah, I was actually looking for familiar faces, and yours popped up.
Oh, sorry I
So
couldn't have
yeah,
been there, but
so
I'm glad we get to. I'm kind of interested to get your post summit thoughts. I guess first of all, what what were you expecting going in from, and I'm more interested like from a feel, how did it feel compared to let's stick with Great Plains, a Great Plains event, from the Fargo days,
yeah.
etc. How did it compare, like what were you expecting you, etc., actually go in there?
So what I expected, I had done some research about Acumatica Summit, and it seemed to be a larger than life event to me. And the most interesting thing happened to me at Summit itself. It actually started to have that feeling of the Great Plains days of before. And I'm sure you've heard this from other people you've had on
I
your
have. I'm
on
very.
your on
I
your on
was
your
expecting to
program.
hear this, but it's still interesting to hear. Keep going.
Yeah, so it was actually that feeling and that genuine. You know what I've learned from the Acumatica folks in general is they have this true commitment to partner an ISV success. Um, Beyond just the technology. I mean, the technology is the enabler, right? And we want to think of it that way, but it's that genuine care for people and wanting success. Um, Beyond just the technology. I mean, the technology is the enabler, right? And we want to think of it that way, but it's that genuine care for people and wanting to know how they can best help. I mean, uh, it's simple as having a hallway conversation with John Roskill, for example, or just picking up the phone and calling AJ. AJ Krishna Murthy. Hope I said that right. And even talking to some of the team members there, Vladimir Panchenko, I had a chance to talk extensively with him, and I was able to just pick up the phone and establish a meeting with AJ, and I know he's a very busy guy. Being the CSO and EVP at Acumatica, just seems to be one of those things that keeps him constantly on the go and certainly on the phone. The fact that they had a connector on the list of Microsoft connectors. And we spent time talking about that definitely, and being able to just reach out to people when you want to, or when you need to, and having that firsthand approach and care is just one of the things that impressed me the most from everything. Summit overall was great. The show was great. I took actually more advantage of the training. I thought the trainings were top notch and certainly delivered on my expectations at least. And
Which courses did you do? I'm curious.
yeah, so I took the entire Acumatica developers track. So
Okay.
that was actually the precursor to me going and getting the certification. Actually, literally, I could have walked out of there and just go do the certification because it was that detailed. So
It's
um,
interesting that you say similar vibe. What about specifically John Roskill to
because it was that detailed. So
It's
um,
interesting that you say similar vibe. What about specifically John Roskill to Doug Burgum? You see any similarities there?
yeah, I think they're both passionate individuals. I'm sure Doug has his way of delivering the message. John is more your archetypical CEO with on point messages. I think um, you know, dog tends to paint a different, completely off the topic story, and somehow he manages to tie it at the end to the message. But hey, whatever works for them, right?
But a similar, do you feel like you have a similar trust level, especially from a partner focused ecosystem?
Yes. So the one thing that I think was very clear to me from the messages I heard from John, AJ, certainly uh, Alex in Moscow, were the fact that Acumatica is effectively innovating and always committing to delivering value to customers and partners. And the fact that this is probably the only company I've seen with a bill of rights, a customer bill of rights, um, it tells me the level of seriousness with the which with they address the market, and certainly um, you know the on point commitment to what they're doing, and certainly to the whole ecosystem. So it's something that really truly impressed me from the whole organization. It's customer bill of rights is just one of those things that you hardly see ever anywhere. So,
I really like that too. And I think it pairs well with, and
yeah.
it's just very transparent as far
Well,
as the
you could have
culture
fooled
goes,
me.
right? Right? It seems like it, right? There's actually a
Yeah.
core there that you can't modify, but the extent to which you can modify things is pretty crazy.
Yeah, you know what? In drawing comparisons and similarities to the GP platform, I think they follow a similar philosophy. And as you know, GP probably has a significant number of ISVs above Acumatica. And the one thing that enables GP to have that type of you know ISV base is its openness. We might not have access directly to the source code, but we certainly can customize the product to no avail. And I see that in Acumatica as well. I see the same values. I see the same as well. I see the same values. I see the same commitment to being able to integrate some of the you know top-notch ISV products that are out there on the platform already. And it's something that really is interesting if you are an ISV developer like myself. Just being able to have you talk about impressive stuff, but just being able to have the wideness of resources and library information available to you out on the Acumatica portal, and certainly more in depth in the partner university, is it's just mind-boggling. I don't know. This is probably the only, I wouldn't say the only, but certainly it's got to be up there in the top three or top four software manufacturers with such an in-depth library of resources oriented to customers, partners, and certainly ISVs. You know, um,
Yeah. And the fact that you can access it without having to pay boatloads of money, right?
correct,
Pay any
correct. It's
money at
like
all. It's all
I
wide
don't
open.
know
Yeah.
how they do it. I can't imagine there's an army of people working on documentation. Maybe there is, but just to be able to have, and it's not like you're waiting, right? It's you have a release. Before you get to the release, you have all the documentation available to it, updated, specifically addressing the stuff that is new and how that integrates with all the other stuff you've done before. It's just mind-boggling to me. And I just you know I'm always impressed by software companies that seriously invest in documentation, and this is one of them for sure. You know,
That's very cool. Also, too, you kind of touched.
invest in documentation, and this is one of them for sure. You know,
That's very cool. Also, too, you kind of touched on this from a technology standpoint. The way I like to describe it is an ISV product. It feels like you're a first class citizen in the product. Would you agree? Like instead of being, you're not like with a legacy product, you might be this bolt on solution where you're kind of in orbit around the ERP product, whereas you can develop something on the Acumatica platform where, because of that open architecture nature, it really feels like you're a first-class citizen within the product. Would you agree with
Yes,
that?
yes, I definitely do agree. I mean, and if you want to get specifically technical, the Acumatica framework is just, you know, it's just impressive all around. Um, just the way you can leverage standard development technology scenarios that it offers. Those are the type of things that, at least in my case, as an ISV, we're constantly looking for in a product. Um, you know, you certainly have two ways to integrate with software, and one, you can create a standalone application that has some sort of direct connection through some API to the software. You can actually make your product looks like the software you are you are certainly targeting. And I think, if I have to be honest, you know, and having such a long GP background, this is what Acumatica is to me. It just resembles in the way it integrates and the way you can do the type of deep integration to the point where your software looks just like the core application. Um, to me, that's money in the bank because you don't have to. Um, to me, that's money in the bank because you don't have to, you know, spend these enormous amount of time training customers just because the software that you're developing looks exactly like the core product. So that's that's a benefit. And the fact that this thing is built from the ground up to be a web-based application, you know, leverage modern technology is just it's just the icing on the cake to me.
So that's interesting. You actually feel like Acumatica is similar to GP in terms of being able to be that first-class citizen when you're developing, at least from a look and feel standpoint.
Correct, correct. It
Interesting.
does. It, you know, in life you draw contrast between things that or between something that you already know to see how other things behave, and that's kind of what I see between the two products. Um, no, I wish blah blah. It has some limitations in the way you can do certain things, but certainly the extensibility models are very similar in the way things behave, in the way you integrate, both at the user interface level, at the database level, and even, you know, web client capabilities. So although I gotta say, Acumatica being ground up to be a web product is just far superior in that sense than GP. That's, you know, that's
Interesting. Yeah.
just
I
the
didn't
nature of
realize
the
the
beast.
similarity part though. Yeah, I could get the
Yeah.
website. Acumatica definitely different. What about on the I don't know much about Dynamics 365 Business Central. What if you compare it that way? Is it also similar for Business Central, or is it a little more of like an API driven outside when you're developing on that platform?
Yeah. So um, Business Central uses the extension. Um, Business Central uses the extension model, and the extension model is nothing more than apps that you, if you want to call it somehow, apps that you bolt onto the product. Now they have a complete, um, you know, look and feel that integrates with the whole product in a similar fashion than Acumatica and even GP. But you know, the more I look at it, um, I think that's just modern ERP in general. You know, modern ERP gives you the abilities to basically have that same look and feel when in their extensibility model than the core product. And I think, uh, you know, some do offer easier ways of doing certain things, but that's the general trend, I think, of modern ERP systems. You know, yeah, you can our counterparts in the tier one space, and they do something very similar as well. So what I like about Acumatica is that low code capability as well that it offers. So you don't have to be a hardcore developer. I mean, things like generic inquiries, those things are super powerful. Being able to create a generic inquiry in turn, uh, turn that around and leverage it as a as an API to both export and import data. I mean, those are things that are not necessarily readily available in other ERP systems, and you have to code that stuff out from scratch as an ISV and develop all the integration points, etc. So that's kind of what I like about how Acumatica went about their business, their development business, and certainly providing a platform that is super easy to use, and so what I like about how Acumatica went about their business, their development business, and certainly providing a platform that is super easy to use, and certainly super easy to integrate with.
And for one more thing on Business Central, when you talk about an app there, tell me if this is right. My impression is that there's a little more red tape to get into the quote app store there. Now, once you're in, you've got a much bigger audience, and so there's reasons to do that. But maybe the initial effort to get in is that a little more red tape to get through and do that?
You know, if you are going to start from scratch, obviously you have to become a member of the Microsoft Partner Program, and there you got to sort of prospect your application, what you're going to develop, and have it go through cycles of approval. But nothing patient, and give it a a quick walkthrough, I guess. And after they're able to approve it and publish it, they certainly have very strict guidelines when it comes to documentation, when it comes to marketing material. In order to get an app on the App Store, once you're there, it's because you've done things the right way. I mean, ultimately, I can see the value of bringing some uniformity across the board when it comes to documentation from the multiple ISVs and partners that participate in documentation from the multiple ISVs and partners that participate in App Store. And certainly, going through the Microsoft Partner Program to get there is there's some value to that. There's plenty of value to that from a company standpoint, and certainly I'm sure on the Microsoft side they see it as valuable as well to have that level of compliance being placed. So in that sense, I don't think necessarily that the two companies are different, because on the Acumatica side, you got to register your product, you got to also get a set of resource IDs for your product. They have strict validation and compliance requirements before you can get your product certified for Acumatica. And certainly, where they differentiate themselves, though, is in Acumatica, I think you have more of a desire from Acumatica to see your product go not only from a where they differentiate themselves, though, is in Acumatica, I think you have more of a desire from Acumatica to see your product go not only from a certified product, but to a favorite product, to a product that they basically recommend with all the implementations. I think there's more of that spirit of pushing ISV products and certainly highlighting them than I would see normally from Microsoft. But it's great value in the two approaches.
And I think one key difference to me is so similar, like in terms of certification and everything. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but one key difference is for Business Central, if I'm a Business Central customer, I can't just go I can't even just build my own solution. I'm limited to the App Store. Whereas like Acumatica, I could go, limited to the App Store?
Outside of the App Store, right? You can develop your own customizations. That's not an issue. But those customizations obviously will be tenant specific. You have ways to load those customizations in your individual tenant and have it not affect anybody else.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so
very similar then.
It is very similar. The model is very similar. The one thing I think the reason why or the one thing about apps on app stores is that once you install that app in that particular tenant, it then becomes available to every other tenant where to that cluster where that app is installed. So deployment tends to be a lot faster. Upgrades are done across the board. and you don't even have to be worried about that. Once Microsoft will validate and make sure that your app is compliant with their next Microsoft will validate and make sure that your app is compliant with their next release, and it gets automatically upgraded as part of their upgrade process. So that
Interesting.
to me is very very valuable for customers because um, you wake up one morning, you have a different version of the app or an upgraded version, and you're ready to go. You don't have to think about these things pretty much, and it's very transparent as far as the customer is concerned. So
Yeah, that sounds like from based on a previous podcast episode with Christian Lindbergh. It sounds like something they want to do. Acumatica is not quite there yet, but they'd
yeah,
like to have that piece in play.
correct,
Interesting.
correct.
So what about I'd love to shift gears into the Power Platform, but before we do, for those who don't know anything about the Microsoft MVP program, I'm curious if you longest running MVP, at least in the GP space. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what what it takes to actually become an MVP in the Microsoft space.
Oh wow, yeah. So thanks for bringing that up. I had totally omitted that, I guess, in my intro, but um, so a little bit about the Microsoft MVP award program is that um, it has about 4,000 MVPs worldwide. Um, it goes through a very elaborate selection process. In fact, you just don't become an MVP because you do blogs or you post things or you participate in the forums. That gets you a lot of it. But what I like to tell people is you have to have been an MVP without necessarily the award in stake, meaning that your contributions to the community have had to be very visible without necessarily the award in stake, meaning that your contributions to the community have had to be very visible across the board to the point where they're elevated and they're in the sites of the Microsoft product groups already, right? So and that spirit of community is one of those things that Microsoft places a lot of emphasis on. So that's one part. The second part, of course, is your overall contributions, whether that's through blogs or videos um, or certainly presentations at different events. Um, and the third factor is certainly being nominated by fellow MVPs. Okay, so becoming an MVP has, I think, those three components to it: is the your participation, your technical expertise that has to be up there, but also that visibility with other MVPs and the overall product groups as a whole, or product groups related to what you are interested in or your area of expertise. And you know, I don't know that there's a magical formula to become one, but certainly when I started working with communities in 2008, when we had those, news groups, if you remember those, the news group platforms, um, it was one of those things that was born as a result of probably a little bit of the state of the economy at the time. This is 2008 we're talking about. So, I think everybody was trying to keep their sanity at that point. And my escape was certainly working with the communities. My escape was certainly working with the communities as a whole. Um,
I think
so
that's when I first saw your name. I think it was in Mark Polino's blog
correct,
that I
correct.
had on my RSS feed. Yes, yes.
So once I started blogging, because as you said, I used to have guys like Mark Polino and Victoria Uden at the time as sort of my mentors. I started dumping a lot of these forum posts that I used to do into blogs and certainly enhance those with screenshots and what's not. And that seemed to have caught the attention of Microsoft. And I was nominated by these guys as well. And that's how it happened. Next thing in July, I woke up, I had a letter from Microsoft telling me that I was an MVP. And welcome to the program, and go be merry. And welcome to the program, and go be merry. And now I think I have traversed 14 years of MVP, MVPness, I like to call it, just to bring some smile to the conversation. And it continues to be very challenging to maintain the spirit of to maintain yourself in the program, because every day you come across some absolutely fantastic talent out there. I'm not the longest tenured MVP. I think there's a couple guys out there that are in the 25-year mark. So,
Wow.
so
Wow.
yes,
It's a
and
marathon, not a sprint,
it's
huh?
a marathon, not a sprint. And those guys, of course, are brilliant individuals, very well respected in the community. Yeah,
And it
I'm
is
I'm
an
not.
annual thing. Every
It's an
year,
annual thing.
you
Yes,
might
it's
not
an
get it.
annual renewal. You might not get it. Live in the MVP program is the night, at least in my particular case, because we are awarded every July, is July 1st between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. You might hit refresh 1,000 times in your inbox until you see that letter come through, that email welcoming you back to the program. So, with the years, I've learned not to stress it anymore. I think it's one of those things where if you know you're doing the right things, and if you know that you continue to be engaged in the community and certainly with the product groups, it's something that you know that might just get you there. You know, so I don't stress it anymore. One of the easiest things I tell people is to become an MVP. The hardest thing is to maintain your MVP status.
That's that's what I
Yeah,
would think.
that's when
Yeah.
that's when the real work begins.
I like the way
So
you said it too. Welcome back. In a sense, you leave every year and you might not make it back in. Yeah. I think that's a
that is
good way of
correct.
looking
Right
at it.
now I'm on a leave, and I'm sure
Yeah.
July
You get
1st I will
you got to
be
earn it every year.
worrying about it again.
What about, you said there's 4,000 worldwide. Now
Yeah.
that's across all the Microsoft products. What about just on GP? How many slots are available
Wow.
for your MVP-ness?
So the GP MVP program has been dwindling over the years because
So
of
maybe
course
take it a
it's
few years ago when it was before it sort of started to fall off the cliff.
okay.
What
Yeah,
what were the number of slots?
at the height of the program, I think we had 15, 14 MVPs at the time. Yeah,
Not that many, not
not that
compared
many.
to the Acumatica list. Right now, the Acumatica program is just very loose and just very easy to get on there. Only 15 slots. Wow.
Yeah, so that was for the GP, and I know
Not
not that
compared
many.
to the Acumatica list. Right now, the Acumatica program is just very loose and just very easy to get on there. Only 15 slots. Wow.
Yeah, so that was for the GP, and I know Nav is fairly, open. I think I don't know if there's more than 60 MVPs in Business Central. I'm sorry, there might be more. I don't keep up much. It's hard to keep up with all these things, but the ERP side of the house, there might be even less on the finance and operations side. For those of you who are not familiar with Microsoft ERPs, there's 3 or 4 ERPs today. And actually, yeah, 3 ERPs: GP, BC, and F&O. So, um, you know, across all those products, I don't think we have more than 200 MVPs.
I
So,
like how you didn't even list SL.
no, I'm talking about actively marketed products by
Right.
Microsoft. And
No, I
and don't
understand.
get me wrong, GP is probably on the same bandwagon at some point. It will be effectively considered a legacy system and under legacy support, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
Except GP has a diehard core set of customers, and I don't know what they will have to do to convince them to go to something else. But
It'll take a long time, that's for sure.
40,000 plus strong, and that's probably that gives pause to Microsoft to think about the next move.
Back on the MVP point, I've always had a gripe with the name, because in sports, when you say MVP, you're talking about one person, right? And I think
Right.
most people, when they see MVP, they're like, oh, wow, you're the MVP. And the truth is that's not the case. I always would have thought it'd be better to call it an all-star. Not the case. I always would have thought it'd be better to call it an all-star or something like that. Something that there's a connotation of a multiple people to it, but I think Acumatica is doing the same thing. They're just copying Microsoft and they're using the MVP language.
If you consider that Microsoft has over probably 100 products in their portfolio, literally you have MVPs across each one of those products. So,
but more than one for each product, right? I mean, you got a team of people for each product. Yeah.
Correct. So, and if you want to extrapolate that, we have 8 billion people living on this little blue marble. I think 4,000 is probably,
that's still a pretty small group. I agree.
Pretty small group.
What about, so your MVP-ness is on GP, right?
So I was.
What about the Power Platform? I've seen you doing a lot of Power Platform stuff.
GP, and 3 years ago, I was added to the Power Platform MVP.
I didn't realize that. Oh, wow. So you've got multiple MVPs now. So that's like double the stress in July.
Double the stress.
He says less stressful. That sounds more stressful to me.
Yeah, my specialty though, even in Power Platform, you have set of specialties. So my specifically is Power Apps, Power Automate, and certainly Power Virtual Agents. I don't do Power BI, or none of those things, but that's kind of the areas where I dabble in Power Platform.
Now, can I ask you on the McCorma side? I see on the McCorma website, you've got something called McCorma Power Approvals. Correct. And what it makes me think is either for that product or for any McCorma product, are you actually using Power Apps and white label website? You've got something called McCorma Power Approvals. Correct. And what it makes me think is either for that product or for any McCorma product, are you actually using Power Apps and white labeling it somehow on top, or how do you actually use your Power App skills at McCorma? Yeah,
so at McCorma, we had a challenge over the years. We had customers asking us for the ability to approve payments outside of the GP application interface. And we tinkered with that for quite some time and how we would come across the right technology to develop it, to the tune of probably 8 or 9 years before we came up with a solution. And our original thought process was, well, we're going to develop this in Xamarin, another Microsoft development technology, and we will release it across the different that there are out there, right? Android or iOS or whatever. And we started that exercise prototyping software to do just that, be able to approve payments outside of the application system without the actual interface. And what we realized is that we would probably spend a few years before we had something that was palatable to customers. And then you had all the challenges of hosting that application or that app. You had all the challenges of securing it, all the challenges of deploying it, right? And certainly getting it to an app store. And those things alone, those 4 things basically detoured us from developing a cross-platform mobile application for approvals. It just seemed like a lot of work, plus the headaches that we would have to put our team fit for an ERP project that usually customers don't want to spend more than 2-3 days implementing, right? So around the 2018, 18 mark, I started doing work with then Project Sienna. And Project Sienna is kind of the precursor for Power Apps, if you want to think about it somehow. And Project Sienna, the promise of Project Sienna was you would just reference a data source, and with that data source, you could connect to it and set up an application in less than 10-15 minutes. So I said, how bad could that be? Let me give it a try. and the tries that I did were successful. No big deal. Now, what I what was wrong with Project CNO, and the tries that I did were successful. No big deal. Now, what I what was wrong with Project CNO at the time was it never came out really of that sort of experimental phase. But then a couple more years, I'm talking here now about 2018, tail end of 2018, we had this Power Apps thing, and that looked a lot more polished. It looked a lot more professional. It was certainly Microsoft low code, no code offering to the market. And I figured, well, we have to try and figure out how this is going to help us. And I had this thing hooked up to GP and with a proof of concept of approvals done in less than a day. And I was like, this is it. This is how we want to develop this. And the fact that we didn't have to host it, the fact that customers didn't have to host. So I spent some good few months convincing my leadership team that we should take a serious look at Power Platform. And also they had actually released back then Microsoft Flow, now named Power Automate.
They
And
always like to add syllables to things, don't they?
yeah. That's a whole different
Sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
conversation. But it does seem like that sometimes. But and is it one word or is it two words? Now it's all two words. There's Microsoft Power Automate. And Power Automate is Power Automate. 2 words. Yeah. So Power Apps is one word. Now it's Power Space Apps. So it's
Right.
so you get the point. But I did convince our leadership, and then we started working more in detail, and we had a product actually. We spent the rest of 29 out, and now creating marketing plans for it. Now it's part of our offering. So we
So you actually
effectively
do have a McCorma product that's built on the Power Apps. I would say specifically the Power Apps platform.
Power Apps and Power Automate platforms. Yes.
So I'm curious there. I didn't know you could do this actually. I've always thought it'd be very interesting. I didn't know you could white label it. And I'm
Well,
curious
what
how it
we
works on the licensing side. Like, do you actually sell the license to the customer and then you pay the fee on the back end, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we are not a CSP, a cloud services provider. So customers do acquire the licenses directly with Microsoft or with their CSP. And what they're acquiring license to is specifically Power Platform licenses, right? They're acquiring either Power Apps or Power Automate licenses, but that's what they're buying. From us, they buy the
So like,
software, specifically Power Platform licenses, right? They're acquiring either Power Apps or Power Automate licenses, but that's what they're buying. From us, they buy the
so like,
software.
so like specifically when they go to run the mobile version of it, the app they download in the App Store would be the Power App. It wouldn't be a McCorma app.
I'm glad you actually asked that, because Power Apps, the Power Apps mobile client, the easiest example, the easiest way to understand that is, think of your Java runtime, right? If you're an old-time developer, think of it as a Java runtime. So on top of the Java runtime, you actually develop your app that consumes, and that Java runtime basically interprets all that file, and that's your app running. Well, similar concept here. Um, your Power Apps application is actually download it and run it into the actual Power Apps application on your mobile phone. So you're not downloading XYZ company mobile application from an app store. What you're downloading is the Power Apps app from iOS or from Android or the Android store, and those are in turn enable your apps to run inside of that container. Okay.
So
Now,
how does that work? Like from an ISV standpoint, it doesn't have your name on it, but then they need your app to actually run. How does it work? Like from a licensing and key
yeah,
perspective?
so the licensing, as I said, you pay the licensing the Power Apps users or the Power Automate users or any of the Power Platform users, you pay that to Microsoft directly. What you're paying us is for the app, the actual app that we develop container. That's what you're paying us for.
And you do
So
have some way to like have a license key, so you make sure that your customers are
yes,
paying the
so
subscription
we
fee or it
we
gets turned
actually
off
yeah
somehow.
yeah we
Interesting. I didn't
actually
realize you could
do
do that.
have
Huh.
ways to turn off the app if we wanted to. The license keys for the app are issued by us, McCorma. The actual app look and feel is controlled by us, McCorma. So that's not, it's not in that sense white labeled. Although future developments of Power Apps will allow you to sort of like um, download and white label apps directly from an app store that will run inside of Power Apps container. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's I think one of the things that you know that you can see vividly going down the road based on the current development.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's I think one of the things that you know that you can see vividly going down the road based on the current development track that Power Apps is following. Um, is something that I know customers have been asking for, just being able to download, for example, a McCorma app directly from iOS or Android that runs, that then is loaded inside of their tenant and run just like any other app that you have on your phone or your device. So um, that's something that I know is at the top of the list of things that customers are asking for. So I won't necessarily say that that's gonna come anytime soon, but I know it's at least on the horizon for something like that to happen.
But still, that's really cool that you've got an actual real product that people pay you for
Hmm.
that's running on Power Apps
Yep,
and the year of an app store. And then your app is sitting on top of that, which
correct,
makes perfect sense. You don't want to
correct.
take care of the lower level plumbing and how you
Yeah,
interact with the device
I don't wanna have
hardware.
to worry. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that you don't worry about. You don't worry about security because that's all managed through Active Directory. You don't worry about hosting because that's all in your Power Apps environment or your Power Platform environment, which in turn sits inside of your Azure platform. And it's just an all around cohesive um, infrastructure for delivering mobile applications without the headaches of how you're going to license it, host it, all these kind of things. And I know Microsoft will continue to make things easier for ISVs like us who are leveraging their low code, no code platform for delivering commercial products. Because this is a commercial products. Because this is a commercial product. What you see on our website is an actual commercial product.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't even know one existed yet. This is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so we our next steps are to see how we get that on App Source. We have some challenges to get the product on App Source, and they're not challenges necessarily related to the product itself. They're more challenges related to the mechanics of testing it. Because if you can think about that, that will require having GP and all our backend infrastructure in place to be able to test that mobile app solution. So this is all integrates with our on-premises products. So
So I've got another Power Apps question that I've been wondering for a long time, and you're the person to ask
I
it
hope
for.
I can
So
answer.
let's say you're in your Power Apps world here only,
Yep.
and you're looking at two things. You're looking at Acumatica and you're looking at Dynamics 365
Hmm.
Business Central. Is there a difference between the two? Or is it just APIs back and forth? Or is somehow Dynamics Central have more Power Apps capability in terms of embedding things or whatever? Or is it basically I'm Power Apps and it makes no difference to me whether I'm hitting a data source from one Acumatica or two the Business Central?
Yeah, I would say it's more the latter. Um, Power Apps and the Power Platform in general. Um, the whole concept is for it to be independent of your data source. What I like about either Business Central or Acumatica is their web services capabilities, web services API capabilities that you can build a set of well, in the case of Central or Acumatica is their web services capabilities, web services API capabilities that you can build a set of well, in the case of Microsoft, they already have a set of connectors built for it. But in the case of Acumatica, I can create my own custom connectors that do specific tasks that I want them to do using the Acumatica framework and therefore developing on the Acumatica API. Uh, that is pretty easy to wrap, in fact, as a custom connector on the Power Platform. And so from that standpoint, and I'll give you a couple examples. For example, doing IoT technology with Acumatica, doing Microsoft IoT technology with Acumatica ERP. Uh, if you're gonna use things like Power Automate to bridge those two things, I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's a simple proposition. Well, I want to say simple because obviously you don't have to write all the platform to do all this stuff that you need to do in Acumatica. So that's one case. You can actually create a Power Apps front end for a simple task. For example, let's say you're gonna use AI in Power Apps to basically identify inventory on your floor, right? So you use your device to capture inventory, and then you can use all the Acumatica API wrapped in as a custom connector to update inventory in your warehouses. So I mean, there's a host of things that I can't give out all the ideas that I have because some of them are stuff that we're considering to do, but certainly the possibilities are endless. And as you said, in the case of Business Central and Acumatica, just the sheer fact that you have access to REST API, but certainly the possibilities are endless. And as you said, in the case of Business Central and Acumatica, just the sheer fact that you have access to REST APIs and you have access to some solid integration points and different integration scenarios. I mean, it just makes it easy to do some of the things that you want to do and enable um, low code development with these ERP systems. So very awesome capabilities, very awesome scenarios. I for one love the amount of flexibility that Acumatica offers in terms of API development and just being able to turn simple things into all data uh, points for data export or import. I mean, it's just fantastic. And really, objectively, it's not something that is complicated. And I think that's by design.
So quick time check here. Are you able to go another 10 minutes or so, or do you have a
No,
hard
I
stop?
am able to go for
You
10
do?
minutes more. Yeah.
Okay,
Well, let
'cause
me
I have
see what do we have here. I have something coming up on my schedule, but let me see if I can move it off. Give me 1 second here.
I'm going to pause the recording here for those no editing faithful like myself. I'm going to pause here. All right, recording unpaused, and we'll see. Mariano, if you got to go, no problem when you get that ping back. So you don't have to agree with this as a Microsoft ISV. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Sure, no worries.
why your response excites me is my impression, not knowing that much about Dynamics 365 Business Central. My impression is that it's, to use a biblical example, old wine in new wineskins. It's got a lot of wrappers and layers and APIs and stuff that make it cloud, but it's got a lot of old stuff under the hood. Whereas Acumatica, they built it from scratch on web technology. And to me, a lot of the marketing, a lot of the strength of it, supposedly, is the Power Platform stuff, the ability to layer Power Apps on top of it. But what I hear you saying is that there's really not a difference from a technical perspective if you're going to layer Power Apps on top of Acumatica versus Dynamics 365 Business Central. And that's how I've always seen it. But is that Is that fair to say?
Okay, so a couple corrections to your statements.
Good.
So
Yeah, please,
you're
please.
right on 80% of it. The other 20% where you're not right is um, back in 2002 or three.
Good.
So
Yeah, please,
you're
please.
right on 80% of it. The other 20% where you're not right is back in 2002 or three, Microsoft actually did a con they basically went and rewrote Navision, what you call Navision, from the ground up again. So the web interface
Oh, I didn't realize that.
was written
Okay.
from the ground up to be um, compatible with um, with the web. You know, it was web technology from the start. So basically, they did an effort back from I think it was 2005 ahead all the way up to when they came out with their announcement of it wasn't called Business Central, and for the life of me, right now it escapes my name. Back in Orlando, a few years back, when they did when they did one of their had a
Yeah.
different name. It wasn't called Business Central back then. It might have been called some 5 word or 6 word product name, which obviously wasn't productive. But anyways, for people like us who are aging and can't remember everything, so back then the thing was that interface was rewritten from scratch. It was, and it's one of the reasons why when Business Central was released, Microsoft started targeting new customers. The idea was to build up a new customer base and then slowly bring all the NAV customers onto Business Central and along with some of the GP customers. Of course, NAV customers are just as diehard as GP customers, and not too many NAV customers have converted. And that's certainly one of the efforts and things that Microsoft has to work on. But just for clarity's sake, the business that Microsoft has to work on. But just for clarity's sake, the Business Central technology, although the code base and although the functionality was written to resemble NAVs, is actually ground up development. So
What about the back end? Is there some older business logic layer, or is it all new, including, is the back end just a SQL Server database? I have no idea.
correct. Backend is SQL Server.
So it's not just I can understand that it'd be a new UI. I've seen that happen, including with
Mhm,
GP, but it was really written entirely, not just in the UI, but even back through the business logic, all the way
correct.
back down to the database.
Correct.
Okay. I didn't realize
Correct.
that.
Yeah. So, and in fact, before you used to customize nav with CAL, now the equivalent for Business Central is AL, but they're certainly different paradigms in terms of customization. So,
They're not
correct.
running in parallel in a sense,
They're not necessarily running in parallel in a sense.
from a
Now,
technology standpoint. Yeah.
correct. So now you can there's some arguments to that. You can actually probably migrate easier from Nav than you can from GP to Business Central, but you know,
Sure.
those are some of the things that stay along. But what is absolutely true in your statement is the fact that Microsoft definitely sees Power Platform as the as your one-stop shop for customizing everything Microsoft. You see, now you're seeing Power Platform embedded in Teams. You're seeing Power Platform embedded in SharePoint. You're seeing Power Platform as a standalone platform. You're seeing more and more Power Platform in Office 365, in Business Central, in Finance and Operation. You're seeing more and more Power Platform in Office 365, in Business Central, in Finance and Operations. So I don't think they're trying to make it a secret. It's what they consider to be the next gen technology for customizing just about any Microsoft product.
So how long do you think before Microsoft has an ERP product that's built within Power Apps using the common data model as a backend? So that
Wow,
is really a ERP product all built in within the Power Platform.
that's a very interesting question. I don't know for a fact what the ERP strategy is, long-term ERP strategy is for Microsoft. Um, I think they still want to keep a tier one solution, aka finance and operations, formerly known as AI in Microsoft Business Central, formerly NAV. Um, but as far as convergence of technologies, that I cannot see in the short term. One thing I can tell you though is these products are leveraging more and more of the dataverse platform as mechanism for data integration and synchronization with other products. Um, so it wouldn't be a surprise to me if one day we wake up and there's no more SQL backend and everything just natively runs on dataverse. But
Oh,
these
is
are just
dataverse
my
the new name for the common data model? I'm already out of date on that.
yeah. So
Oh, okay,
the
okay.
the common data model. Let's put it this way. There's a couple concepts, right? Dataverse is just Microsoft's subset of the common data model. Keep in mind that the common data model is a consortium driven approach. So had Microsoft, they had Adobe, and a whole uh, set of other companies working on the common data model as a consortium. But Dataverse is Microsoft's set of subset of the common data model. Um,
Okay. So yeah, you
so
could see how eventually your whole ERP backend could be Dataverse
correct.
with
So
a
I
Power
could
Apps
see
front end or something else on the front end. That
exactly.
makes
I could
sense.
see I could see eventually how, and I'm not saying they're substituting the entire current UI that they have for a Business Central or finance and operations for uh, Power Platform, but certainly um, when you look at things like I don't know if you're familiar with model-driven applications. That's one way of customizing and creating seamless Dynamics 365 integrations with what is now way of customizing and creating seamless Dynamics 365 integrations with what is now or what is formerly known as CRM, right? But I can see that extensibility model gaining more and more popularity as a way of customizing um, the ERP interfaces more than Canvas applications, which is a second aspect of Power Apps development um, would reflect. So I think you are onto something, but I can't put my finger and tell you yes, that's gonna happen because I can see the trends, but I can't necessarily put my finger on it and say that's the ultimate goal. But it's
But I could
certainly an
see that
interesting
being a
thought.
selling point for Dynamics
Yep,
365. I mean, even if I'm thinking that way, you don't sell the current, you sell the future, right?
correct,
And that could be a total selling. That could be a total selling point for that
correct,
product.
absolutely,
What
absolutely.
about the McCormick product? Is that a Dataverse backend, or you have your own backend
So
for
our product uses the SQL Server backend that where you run Dynamics GP, of course. And so we have our tables are deployed there, and we access that information via the on-premises data gateway that you have to lay down to be able to connect to your
Oh,
on-premises
so your
resources.
back end is still the same as the
Correct,
ERP part. That makes sense. So
correct.
the data is stored in the same place.
Now, are we gonna leverage Dataverse one day? I don't know. Maybe when we do something else, maybe when we do Acumatica, we'll factor that into our design and see how we can leverage some of that. But I don't know. Um, we definitely continue to do a lot of R&D and see where R&D is one of those things where they give you a pool of money, and then you have of how we're going to leverage these technologies. But we certainly are making roads into leveraging a great deal of the platform. Certainly, Power Apps, Power Automate. We're doing some research around Power Virtual Agents and how we can leverage that with Dynamics GP. We've done some internal prototypes as to what we want, and certainly, extending that to Acumatica, looking how we can do some of the things that we do today in Acumatica. Is there Power Apps or Power Automate in the future of that? There could be, but you know, just continue to do good work. That's what we focus on, and add value to our customers.
And throwing a little wrench into that, bringing it back to Acumatica to round us out here. I think you've got a big difference between those two worlds in terms of the licensing. In the Acumatica world, it's not per user. And so I'm sure that has you thinking about bringing it back to Acumatica to round us out here. I think you've got a big difference between those two worlds in terms of the licensing. In the Acumatica world, it's not per user. And so I'm sure that has you thinking about how do we roll things out in Acumatica? Maybe you wind up coding more just to take advantage of that no cost licensing.
The question we have to answer is what constitutes consumption, or what constitutes a transaction in our world, and then drive on from there. I believe we can definitely wrap our minds around it at some point. Right now, we are focused on understanding the gaps and where we can make a serious play in the market, and ultimately deliver value there as well. The licensing stuff, that's not for me to figure out. That's for our marketing team to figure out.
Well, let's talk again when you get to that point, because ISVs are going to have to do battle on what counts as consumption, and I'd love to go to battle with you. I'm independent here with Acumatica, and I'd love to see that be as liberal as possible.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, thanks, Mariano, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Tim, was great seeing you once more, and certainly chatting with you this time around about something not necessarily GP related all the time. So this is good. This is a good conversation. I love it, and I'll be happy to be back at any point you think it's okay.
And welcome to the Acumatica ecosystem. I'm looking forward to the next few years.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com.